Waverly Thompson, 29, stared at her phone in disbelief, her coffee growing cold beside her. The voice memo from her parents, clearly meant for her perfect sister Madeline, had just revealed the family secret they'd kept from her entire life. "They've been lying to me for decades," she whispered, hands trembling. Her entire identity was built on a foundation that had just crumbled beneath her feet, and now she had to decide what to do with this devastating information. Before I dive into this wild family drama, let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever had that stomach-dropping moment when you discovered something you weren't supposed to know about your family, hit that like button. Family secrets have a way of coming to light when you least expect it. And trust me, this story of family betrayal will have you questioning everything you thought you knew about blood loyalty. Subscribe to hear more family revenge dramas like this one, and let's get into how my life completely unraveled. Growing up in the affluent suburb of Oak Ridge, Connecticut, I always thought we were the picture-perfect American family. My parents, Richard and Eleanor Thompson, were respected pillars of our community. Dad was a cardiothoracic surgeon at Oak Ridge Memorial, while Mom ran her own interior design business, catering to the town's elite. They seemed to have it all figured out: the sprawling colonial house with the pristine lawn, the country club membership, and two daughters who supposedly completed their idyllic life. My older sister Madeline was the golden child valedictorian Yale graduate, and now a successful corporate attorney in Manhattan. She had always been the daughter who made our parents beam with pride at every dinner party and family gathering. Madeline just made partner at her firm, they would announce while sipping champagne with their friends, the youngest in the company's history. The pride in their voices was unmistakable. Then, there was me, Waverly. I wasn't a failure by any means, but I certainly wasn't Madeline. I'd graduated with a respectable degree in communications from Boston University and had built a modest but growing career as a social media manager for a sustainability startup. I lived in a small but charming apartment in Boston, dated occasionally, and called my parents dutifully every Sunday night. They never criticized me outright, but their subtle comments revealed their true feelings. "Waverly, have you thought about applying for that marketing director position? The benefits would be so much better," Mom would say during our weekly calls. Or Dad would chime in with, "Your cousin Jennifer just bought her first house. Wouldn't it be nice to start building some equity instead of throwing money away on rent?" They meant well, I told myself. They just wanted security for me. The dynamic had been this way for as long as I could remember. Madeline excelled. I existed in her shadow. During family gatherings, relatives would gush over Madeline's latest accomplishments, while asking me polite but disinterested questions about my little social media job. I had grown accustomed to being the afterthought in my family, the daughter who was loved but not celebrated. Our childhood photos told the story clearly. Madeline's milestones were meticulously documented: ballet recitals, science fair victories, debate team trophies. My parents had spared no expense on her extracurricular activities, hiring private tutors and coaches to nurture her talents. Meanwhile, my own interests in photography and writing had been treated as nice hobbies, but nothing worth investing in seriously. "We just want you girls to have the best opportunities," Mom would say whenever I pointed out the disparity. Dad would add, "Madeline just has very specific goals, honey. When you figure out what you really want, we'll support you the same way." Despite the imbalance, I never doubted they loved me. I just assumed I was the daughter who needed less attention, less investment, less celebration. I had accepted my place in our family hierarchy and built my self-worth around being self-sufficient and undemanding. I told myself I was the easy child, the one who didn't need the spotlight. Madeline and I maintained a cordial relationship, though we were never particularly close. The 7-year age gap meant we had never really shared friends or interests. Our interactions at family gatherings were pleasant, but superficial discussions about work, the weather, or mom and dad's latest renovation project. She would occasionally offer me career advice or recommend books she thought might help me find my direction. I accepted these gestures as her way of showing sisterly care, even if they sometimes felt condescending. "You should really read Power Moves in the Digital Age," she had told me at Christmas last year. "It might help you position yourself for something more substantial." She had smiled while saying this, touching my arm in what appeared to be genuine concern. I had thanked her and added the book to my nightstand pile where it remained unopened. Our parents beamed at these exchanges, clearly pleased to see Madeline taking me under her wing. "Isn't it wonderful how Madeline always looks out for you?" Mom had whispered to me in the kitchen as we prepared dessert. I had nodded and smiled, swallowing the familiar sting. Little did I know that everything I believed about our family, the perfect facade we presented to the world, and the dynamics I had accepted as normal, was built on an elaborate lie that had been maintained for nearly 3 decades. A lie that would be accidentally exposed by a simple technological mishap, toppling our family's carefully constructed reality like a house of cards. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was getting ready for work, sipping my first coffee of the day while scrolling through emails on my phone, when a notification from my parents popped up. A voice memo. This wasn't unusual. Mom often sent voice recordings, instead of typing out long messages claiming her fingers were too arthritic for all that typing. I tapped on it without much thought, expecting to hear Mom's cheerful voice reminding me about Dad's upcoming birthday or asking about my plans for the long weekend. Instead, I heard my father's voice, unusually serious and low. "I think we need to tell Madeline about the trust fund situation before she finds out from someone else," Dad was saying, his voice tense. "The paperwork for the family trust is being finalized next month, and if she sees that Waverly's been excluded, she'll want to know why." My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. Trust fund? What trust fund? And why was I excluded from it? "Richard, we've been over this," my mother's voice replied, sounding exasperated. "Madeline is our biological daughter. Waverly is not. The trust is specifically for blood relatives. That was always the agreement with your parents when they set it up." The mug slipped from my fingers, crashing onto my kitchen floor and shattering hot coffee splashing across my bare feet. I barely noticed the burning sensation. Not their biological daughter. What was Mom talking about? My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Had I misunderstood something? I know, Dad continued, sounding troubled. "But we've raised Waverly since she was 6 months old. She's been our daughter in every way that matters for 29 years. Don't you think she deserves a share too?" "Of course I do," Mom snapped back. "But your parents were clear about the terms, and now that they're both gone, we're just executing their wishes. Besides, we've already paid for Waverly's education and given her that startup money for her apartment. Madeline is the one carrying on the Thompson bloodline. She and Jason are trying to get pregnant." I remember," Dad sighed. "I just don't want Madeline to feel uncomfortable about inheriting everything when she knows how Waverly struggles financially. You know how protective she's always been of her." Protective, Mom scoffed. "She barely acknowledges Waverly exists except at family gatherings. And even then, it's just to make herself look good." My head was spinning. The revelation that I wasn't their biological child was shocking enough, but hearing my mother's casual dismissal of my sister's relationship with me, and apparently my financial struggles, was another blow entirely. "Eleanor, that's not fair," Dad protested weakly. "Madeline loves Waverly in her own way." "Her own condescending way, you mean?" Mom retorted. "Look, let's not argue about this again. The fact is, Waverly was Patricia and Michael's mistake. We did them an enormous favor by taking her in when they couldn't handle parenthood. We've given her a good life, opportunities, love. But the Thompson Family Trust is for Thompson blood, and that's Madeline, not Waverly. Period. Patricia and Michael, the names meant nothing to me." Who were these people? My real parents. Fine, Dad conceded, sounding defeated. But we need to tell Madeline before the paperwork is finalized. She deserves to know why the distribution is uneven. Agreed, Mom said, her voice softening. Let's invite her for dinner next weekend. We can explain everything then. Should we ever tell Waverly, Dad? Asked hesitantly. She's an adult now. Don't you think she has a right to know where she came from? There was a long pause before my mother answered. What would be the point, Richard? It would only hurt her to know she was unwanted by her real parents. Patricia and Michael signed away all their rights. They didn't want to be found. They've probably forgotten all about her by now. Why open that wound, I suppose. You're right, Dad. Sighed again. I just hate keeping this from her. Sometimes, when she asks about family medical history or why she doesn't look much like either of us, I feel terrible lying. We're protecting her, Mom insisted. That's what parents do. The recording ended abruptly, leaving me standing in my kitchen surrounded by broken ceramic and cooling coffee, my world completely shattered. I played the voice memo again, then a third time, hoping desperately that I had somehow misunderstood. But with each replay, the truth became clearer and more painful. I wasn't a Thompson. I wasn't Richard and Eleanor's daughter. I was someone else's mistake, a baby given away and never spoken of again. The golden childhood I thought I'd had, albeit in my sister's shadow, was a complete fabrication. The family I thought was mine had never truly been mine at all. I called in sick to work that day, something I rarely did. I couldn't possibly focus on creating social media content about sustainable living, when my entire life had just been revealed as unsustainable, built on lies and secrets. I spent the day alternating between numbness, rage, and gut-wrenching sobs that left me gasping for air. By evening, my emotions had crystallized into a cold, sharp clarity. I knew three things with absolute certainty. First, I needed to find out who Patricia and Michael were, my biological parents who had given me away. Second, I needed to confront the Thompsons. I couldn't bring myself to think of them as Mom and Dad anymore. And third, I needed to figure out who Waverly Thompson really was, if not the person I had believed myself to be for nearly 3 decades. I considered calling Madeline. Did she know? Had she grown up aware that her little sister wasn't really her sister at all? The thought made my stomach turn. All those years of living in her shadow, of feeling less than, took on an entirely new dimension. Had she been treating me with condescension not just because I was less successful, but because she knew I wasn't really a Thompson? No, I decided. From the voice memo, it sounded like Madeline was also in the dark about my origins. The dinner they were planning was meant to inform her about the trust fund situation, and presumably about my adoption as well. The thought gave me a small, bitter comfort. At least I wasn't the only one who had been deceived. That night, I did something I had never done before. I went through old photo albums, scrutinizing every family picture with new eyes. How had I never noticed that I looked nothing like the Thompsons? Richard and Eleanor were both tall, with light brown hair and hazel eyes. Madeline had inherited their height and coloring, along with Eleanor's heart-shaped face and Richard's straight nose. Then there was me, petite with dark hair, and eyes so deeply brown they appeared almost black. My olive complexion was nothing like their peaches and cream skin that burned easily in the sun. How would I explain these differences to myself all these years? I vaguely remembered asking once, when I was about 10, why I didn't look like the rest of the family. "You take after my grandmother," Eleanor had said smoothly. She was quite petite, too, with the same beautiful dark eyes. "We have some Italian heritage on that side." I had accepted this explanation without question, even feeling special for carrying these supposedly distinctive family traits. Now I realized it had been just another lie in their elaborate deception. Next, I turned to social media and began searching for anyone named Patricia or Michael who might have connections to the Thompsons. It was a long shot. Connecticut was full of Michaels and Patricias, and I had no last name to narrow down my search. Still, I spent hours scrolling through Facebook and LinkedIn profiles looking for faces that might resemble mine for any clue about who these people might be. Around midnight, exhausted and no closer to answers, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront the Thompsons immediately. They had kept this secret for 29 years. They could wait a little longer while I gathered more information. I needed to approach this from a position of knowledge, not just hurt and anger. The next morning, I forced myself to go to work. I went through the motions, responding to emails, scheduling posts, attending a team meeting where I nodded and smiled at appropriate intervals while my mind was light years away. My coworkers noticed something was off, but I brushed off their concerns with vague mentions of not sleeping well. During my lunch break, I researched adoption records in Connecticut. I discovered that many adoption records were sealed, especially from that era, but there were processes to petition for access. I could file a request with the Department of Children and Families, but it might take months to get a response if they responded at all. I also found several online forums for adoptees searching for their biological parents. The stories I read were both heartening and devastating tales of joyful reunions and crushing rejections of mysteries solved and questions that remained eternally unanswered. I created an anonymous account and posted my situation asking for advice on how to proceed. By the end of the workday, my post had received several compassionate responses with practical suggestions. DNA testing services, hiring a private investigator specializing in adoption searches, contacting the hospital where I was born if I knew which one it was. That evening, I ordered a DNA test kit from a popular ancestry website. It wouldn't provide immediate answers, but it might eventually lead me to relatives who could help piece together my origin story. As I completed the order, I felt a strange mix of hope and dread. What if my biological parents didn't want to be found? What if they had other children who knew nothing about me? What if my entire existence was, as Eleanor had so callously put it, a mistake they had long since forgotten? But beneath these anxieties, a new emotion was taking root: determination. The Thompsons had controlled the narrative of my life for 29 years. They had decided who I was, what I knew about myself, and even how I fit into their family hierarchy. That control was over. Whatever happened next, whether I found my biological family or not, I was reclaiming the right to my own story. The DNA test kit arrived 3 days later in a small, unassuming package. I followed the instructions carefully, spitting into the tube and sealing it, aware that this simple act might change my life forever. After dropping it in the mail, I was told it would take 4 to 6 weeks for results. 6 weeks felt like an eternity when every day brought new questions about my identity bubbling to the surface. I couldn't wait that long for answers, so I decided to dig deeper into the Thompson family archives without alerting them to what I knew. I called Eleanor on Friday, keeping my voice casual, as I asked if I could stop by the house that weekend to look through some old photos for a personal project. She sounded delighted by my sudden interest in family history. "Of course, sweetie, Dad and I are having lunch with the Harrisons on Saturday, but we should be home by 3. Come by any time after that." The fact that she could lie so effortlessly, still playing the role of my loving mother while knowing I was not her daughter, made my blood boil. But I matched her performance, keeping my tone light and appreciative. "Thanks, Mom. I'll see you around 4 then." The familiar drive to Oak Ridge the next day felt surreal. The streets where I had ridden my bike as a child, the park where I had played soccer, the high school I had attended, all of these landmarks now seemed like props on a stage where I had unwittingly been the main character in someone else's production. I pulled into the Thompsons' circular driveway at precisely 4:05 p.m. Eleanor greeted me at the door with her usual perfume-scented hug, and Richard emerged from his study to give me a warm embrace. I hugged them back mechanically, fighting the urge to recoil from their touch. "You look tired, honey," Eleanor observed, her brow furrowing with what appeared to be genuine concern. "Are you getting enough sleep? Work has been busy," I replied, the half-truth coming easily. "Where are those old photo albums? I'm especially interested in baby pictures, mine and Madeline's." If my specific request raised any alarms, they didn't show it. Richard led me to the study where several leather-bound albums were stored in the built-in bookshelves. "Take your time," he said, squeezing my shoulder affectionately. "Mom made some of those lemon cookies you like. I'll bring you a plate." As soon as I was alone, I began my search in earnest. I wasn't just looking at photos this time. I was looking for documents, letters, anything that might reveal more about Patricia and Michael or the circumstances of my adoption. The photo albums yielded little new information, though I noted with fresh clarity that there were no photos of Eleanor pregnant with me, and my earliest baby pictures showed me at about 6 months old, already in the Thompson home. While Richard and Eleanor busied themselves in the kitchen, I quietly moved my search to their home office. I knew they kept important papers in a filing cabinet beside the desk. Guilt nagged at me as I carefully slid open drawers and rifled through folders. This was an invasion of privacy, something I had been raised never to do. But then again, they had invaded the very foundation of my identity. Fair was fair. In the back of a drawer labeled Insurance, I found a sealed envelope marked WT Documentation. With trembling fingers, I opened it to find my original birth certificate, adoption papers, and a single handwritten letter. The birth certificate listed my biological parents, Patricia Morales and Michael Chen. My heart raced. I had names, real names, and even more importantly, the realization that I was half Latina, half Chinese. The adoption papers were dated 6 months after my birth, and signed by both Patricia and Michael, relinquishing all parental rights to Richard and Eleanor Thompson. There was no indication that it was a forced adoption or that my biological parents had been pressured in any way. They had given me up voluntarily. The letter was the most revealing document of all. Dated a week before the adoption was finalized, it was from Patricia to Eleanor. "Eleanor, as we complete this process, I want to thank you and Richard again for giving Waverly the life Michael and I simply cannot provide right now. Please know that this decision is breaking our hearts, but we truly believe it's best for her. We're too young, too unstable, and she deserves parents who are ready for the responsibility we weren't prepared for. I know we agreed this would be a closed adoption, and Michael and I will honor that agreement. We won't try to contact her or interfere in your family. I only ask that you tell her someday that she was loved, that giving her up was the hardest thing we've ever done. But we did it because we loved her enough to want better for her than what we could give. Michael doesn't know I'm writing this letter. He thinks a clean break is kinder to everyone. Maybe he's right. But I couldn't bear the thought of Waverly growing up thinking she was unwanted or abandoned. If you ever do tell her about us, please give her this letter." With gratitude and grief, Patricia Morales' tears blurred my vision as I read and reread the letter. They had loved me. They hadn't forgotten me. And the Thompsons had kept this letter from me for 29 years, despite Patricia's explicit request that I receive it someday. I heard footsteps approaching and hastily photographed the documents with my phone before returning them to the envelope and the envelope to its hiding place. I had just closed the drawer when Eleanor appeared with a plate of cookies and 2 cups of tea. "Find anything interesting?" she asked, setting the tray down on the desk. "Just some cute Halloween photos," I lied, gesturing to the album I had left open to a page of Madeline and me in matching witch costumes when I was about 5. We really loved those pointy hats, didn't we? I stayed another hour making small talk and pretending to look through more albums while my mind raced with my new discoveries. When I finally left promising to return for Sunday dinner soon, I felt like I might explode with all the unspoken truths between us. Back in my apartment, I immediately began searching for Patricia Morales and Michael Chen online. With full names, I had much more to go on than before. I found several matches for each name, but nothing that definitively connected them to each other or to Connecticut 29 years ago. I would need more information. The next day was Sunday, the day I usually called the Thompsons. I debated skipping the call, unsure if I could maintain my facade of ignorance, but curiosity won out. I wanted to know if they would mention the dinner they were planning with Madeline, the one where they intended to tell her about me. Richard answered, sounding distracted. "Hey, sweetheart, can I call you back? We're just on our way out to meet your sister for brunch." Brunch, not dinner. Had they moved up their timeline, did they suspect I knew something? "Sure, Dad," I said, the title sticking in my throat. "Is everything okay? You sound stressed." "Everything's fine," he said too quickly. "Madeline has some big news apparently, and your mother is in a tizzy trying to get out the door on time." Big news, like what I pressed. No idea. Maybe that promotion she's been angling for. Or maybe she and Jason are finally expecting. "You know your mother is desperate for grandchildren." The casual way he referred to grandchildren, Thompson, grandchildren, bloodline, grandchildren, sent a wave of anger through me. I bit back the bitter words that threatened to spill out. "Well, have fun," I managed. "Tell Madeline I said hi." I spent the rest of the day alternating between searching for my biological parents online and obsessively checking my phone, half expecting a call from either the Thompsons or Madeline. By evening, when no call had come, I grew increasingly anxious. Had they told her about me? How had she reacted, and why hadn't anyone thought to include me in this conversation that was fundamentally about my life? I seriously considered calling Madeline directly, but something held me back. I didn't want her version of events filtered through the Thompsons' perspective. I wanted to find my biological parents first, to have some answers of my own, before confronting the family that had raised me on a foundation of lies. Little did I know that the confrontation was coming sooner than I expected, and from a direction I hadn't anticipated. Hey, everyone. We're right at that turning point in the story where Waverly's world is completely upside down. She's discovered her biological parents' names and that heartbreaking letter, but there's so much more to this family drama that's about to unfold. Can you believe the Thompsons kept that letter from her for 29 years? If you're as invested in Waverly's journey as I am, hit that like button to let me know you want to see what happens next. Are you Team Waverly? Do you think the Thompsons had their reasons? Drop a comment below with your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the explosive confrontation that's coming in the next part. I promise. The family secrets are NEM. About to get even more intense. Monday morning brought a text from Madeline that sent my heart racing. "We need to talk. Are you free for dinner tonight? I can drive to Boston." This wasn't like Madeline. She rarely initiated contact with me, and she certainly never offered to make the hour-and-a-half drive from Manhattan to Boston on a weeknight. Something had definitely happened at that brunch. I texted back, "Sure." 7 p.m. at my place, keeping it casual while my mind spun with possibilities. "See you then," came her terse reply. I went to work but accomplished little, my thoughts continually drifting to the impending conversation with my sister or the woman I had always believed was my sister. By the time I got home, I was a bundle of nerves. I tidied my already clean apartment, changed outfits twice, and even uncorked a bottle of the expensive red wine Madeline had given me for Christmas, letting it breathe on the counter. At precisely 7:00 p.m., my doorbell rang. Madeline stood there, looking immaculate, as always in a tailored pantsuit, her Thompson hazel eyes sharp and evaluating as she stepped inside. She declined my offer of wine with a curt shake of her head. "I'm pregnant," she announced without preamble, standing rigidly in my living room. That was my big news yesterday. Congratulations, I said, automatically genuinely happy for her despite everything else. That's wonderful, Madeline. You and Jason must be thrilled. We are, she confirmed, her expression softening slightly. It's early days, yet just 10 weeks, but everything looks good so far. I'm going to be an aunt, I said the words, feeling strange in my mouth. Would I be an aunt, or was that relationship like every other in my life built on a falsehood? Madeline's face hardened again. That's actually what I came to talk to you about. Mom and Dad told me something yesterday that I'm still trying to process. Here it was the moment of truth. I held my breath, waiting. They told me you're adopted, Madeline said, watching my face closely. That you're not biologically their daughter, or my sister. Despite knowing this was coming, hearing it stated so baldly by Madeline was like a physical blow. I sank onto my sofa, not trusting my legs to hold me up. How long have you known? She demanded, remaining standing, towering over me like a prosecutor. I just found out last week, I admitted, deciding there was no point in lying. They sent me a voice memo by mistake, one that was meant for you. They were discussing telling you about me because of some family trust issue. Madeline's eyes widened. So they didn't intend for you to know either, I shook my head. Apparently not. They never planned to tell me. She sat down heavily on the armchair across from me, looking genuinely shocked. I don't even know what to say. They told me they'd always planned to tell both of us when the time was right. Well, they lied to you too, then, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. In the voice memo, Mom Eleanor specifically said there would be no point in telling me, that it would only hurt me to know I was unwanted by my real parents. Madeline flinched at my use of Eleanor's name. They're still our parents, Waverly. They raised you. They loved you. Did they? I challenged, the week's worth of pent-up emotions finally finding an outlet. Or did they just take me in as some enormous favor to my biological parents? Did you know Mom referred to me as someone's mistake in that voice memo? They wouldn't say that Madeline protested, but uncertainty flickered across her face. I heard it with my own ears, I insisted. I can play it for you if you want. She shook her head. That's not necessary. I believe you heard what you heard. But people say things in private that they don't really mean, especially when discussing sensitive topics. Like how I apparently struggle financially compared to you. Or how you barely acknowledge I exist except at family gatherings. That was in there too. Madeline paled. I don't think of you that way. Don't you, I pressed. All those condescending book recommendations and career advice, the way you talk about my little social media job. You've always treated me like I'm somehow less than you, Madeline. And now I find out it's because I literally am less, at least in the eyes of the Thompson Family Trust. That's not fair, she said, her voice rising. I never knew you weren't biologically related to us. I've always just seen you as my little sister who needed guidance. Guidance, I repeated scornfully. Is that what you call it? She took a deep breath, visibly trying to calm herself. Look, I didn't come here to fight with you. I came because I'm about to have a baby, your niece or nephew, and I wanted to clear the air. Mom and Dad told me about the trust fund, too. It's true that it's set up for biological descendants only. That was our grandparents' decision, not Mom and Dad's. And you're okay with that, I demanded, with inheriting everything while I get nothing just because of DNA. Of course not, she said, sounding genuinely distressed. That's the other reason I came. Jason and I want to set up a separate trust for you with an equal share. It's the right thing to do. Her offer took me by surprise. I had been prepared for defensiveness, for justifications, but not for this apparent generosity. I don't want your charity, Madeline, I said after a moment. I want the truth. I want to know who I really am and where I come from. I understand that, she said softly. And for what it's worth, I think you deserve those answers. Have Mom and Dad told you anything about your biological parents? I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal about my snooping. Not directly. But I found some documents at their house, my original birth certificate and adoption papers. My biological parents are Patricia Morales and Michael Chen. Madeline's eyes widened. You went through their papers, Waverly. Don't you dare say that's wrong. I cut her off. They've been lying to me my entire life. I had a right to know. She held up her hands in a placating gesture. I was going to say that's understandable under the circumstances. Did you find anything else? Any contact information? Just a letter from Patricia to Eleanor, written before the adoption was finalized. She asked them to tell me someday that I was loved, that giving me up was the hardest thing they ever did. She wanted me to have that letter. They kept it from me for 29 years. Madeline was quiet for a long moment, absently resting a hand on her still flat stomach. I'm sorry, Waverly. You deserved better than that. We all did. What did they tell you? I asked. About why they adopted me. They said they were friends with your biological parents in college. That Patricia got pregnant accidentally, and she and Michael were too young and unstable to raise a child. They were unmarried, still students, with no money and no support from their families. Mom and Dad had been trying to have another child after me with no success, so when Patricia approached them about adoption, it seemed like the perfect solution. This new information sent my mind reeling. Friends from college. That was a connection I hadn't expected. Did they say what happened to Patricia and Michael after the adoption? Where they are now, Madeline shook her head. Just that they honored the closed adoption agreement and never contacted us again. Mom seemed to think they probably got married eventually and might have other children, but she wasn't sure. I took a long sip of my wine, trying to process everything. So what happens now? You go back to your perfect life with your husband and your baby and your trust fund, and What? Pretend none of this matters. That's not what I want, Madeline said firmly. I want us to still be sisters, Waverly. Biology doesn't change the fact that we grew up together, that we share a history and a family. A family built on lies, I reminded her. Yes, they lied, and that was wrong, she acknowledged. But they're still the people who raised us, who loved us in their imperfect way. I'm not asking you to forgive them immediately, or to pretend this doesn't change things. I'm just asking you not to shut me out. Especially now. She gestured toward her stomach, and I felt a twinge of something complicated resentment, mixed with a genuine desire not to punish an unborn child for the sins of our parents. I need time, Madeline, I said finally. This is all still so fresh, and I'm still trying to figure out who I am now that everything I believed about myself has turned out to be false. I understand, she said, rising to leave. Take all the time you need, but please know that whatever you decide about Mom and Dad, my door is always open to you. You'll always be my sister Waverly. That's one thing that isn't a lie. As she gathered her purse and coat, she hesitated. There's one more thing. Mom and Dad don't know that I know that you found out accidentally. They think they told me first, and I'm coming to check on you. I thought it would be easier that way, at least for now. I nodded, appreciating this small act of solidarity. As Madeline left, I felt both emotionally drained and strangely liberated. The confrontation had gone nothing like I'd imagined, yet somehow it had given me clarity about my next steps. The day after Madeline's visit, I took a personal day from work and began my search for Patricia Morales and Michael Chen in earnest. Now that I knew they had been college friends with the Thompsons, I had a new angle to explore. I started by researching which college Richard and Eleanor had attended. Yale University class of 1986. Yale's online alumni directory wasn't publicly accessible, but their old yearbooks had been digitized and were available through the university's website. I spent hours scrolling through grainy black and white photos of the mid-1900s 982nd's Yale student body until I found them Richard and Eleanor looking impossibly young and carefree. Richard was in the pre-med society, while Eleanor was listed as an art history major and member of the interior design club. I scanned the yearbooks for any mention of Patricia Morales or Michael Chen. In the 1987 yearbook, I found a Michael Chen listed as a computer science major and member of the Asian Students Association. His photo showed a handsome young man with a serious expression and the same deep brown eyes I saw every day in my own mirror. My heart raced at this first glimpse of my biological father. Patricia Morales was harder to find. There was no listing for her in any of the yearbooks I could access. Had she dropped out, transferred, or had she attended a different college entirely? The Thompsons' story about being college friends suddenly seemed less reliable. I shifted my search strategy, looking instead for current information about Michael Chen from Yale's class of 1987. LinkedIn yielded several Michael Chens who had attended Yale, but only one who graduated in 1987 with a computer science degree. According to his profile, he was now the chief technology officer at a successful tech company in San Francisco. His profile picture showed an older version of the yearbook photo, the same serious eyes, now framed by silver-streaked hair and smile lines. My fingers hovered over the connect button. Should I reach out directly? What would I even say? Hi, I think you might be my biological father who gave me up for adoption 29 years ago. It seemed too abrupt, too potentially devastating for everyone involved. Instead, I decided to gather more information first. I searched public records for marriages between Michael Chen and Patricia Morales in the years following 1987 but found nothing. I broadened my search to include any marriage records for Michael Chen from Yale around that time period. The breakthrough came when I found a marriage license issued in California in 1992, 5 years after graduation, for Michael Chen and Patricia Rodriguez. Could Rodriguez have been Patricia's maiden name, and Morales a married name from a previous relationship? Or had the Thompsons altered her name in their retelling? Further searching revealed that Michael Chen and Patricia Rodriguez Chen had 2 children, Gabriella Chen, 27, and Daniel Chen, 24. The timing meant Gabriella had been born just 2 years after my adoption was finalized. I had siblings. Half-siblings, but siblings nonetheless. Social media searches led me to both Gabriella and Daniel's profiles. Gabriella was a pediatrician in San Francisco, married with a 1-year-old daughter. Daniel was completing a graduate program in environmental engineering at UC Berkeley. Both had features that resembled mine, the same dark eyes, similar smiles. Looking at their photos felt like finding missing puzzle pieces of myself. I also found Patricia's profile. She was a literature professor at San Francisco State University, specializing in Latinx literature. Her profile picture showed a beautiful woman with a warm smile and silver-streaked dark hair pulled into an elegant bun. According to her professional biography, she had been born in Puerto Rico and raised in Connecticut, another connection that fit the timeline. Everything pointed to this being my biological family, living their lives in San Francisco, perhaps thinking of me occasionally but never knowing what had become of the baby girl they had given up all those years ago. Did they want to know, or would my sudden appearance disrupt the lives they had carefully built after making the painful decision to give me up? The DNA test results arrived in my email the following week, confirming what I already suspected. I had significant Hispanic and Chinese ancestry, and the system had identified several distant cousins with the surnames Chen and Rodriguez in their family trees. The closest match was a second cousin on the Rodriguez side who lived in Puerto Rico. Armed with this confirmation, I crafted a careful email to Michael Chen. Dear Mr. Chen, my name is Waverly Thompson. I believe that 29 years ago, you and Patricia Rodriguez, possibly known as Morales at that time, made the difficult decision to place your baby daughter for adoption with Richard and Eleanor Thompson in Connecticut. I am that daughter. I recently discovered my adoption under difficult circumstances and have been trying to understand my origins. I found a letter from Patricia expressing that giving me up was the hardest thing you both ever did, but that you did it out of love. I want to assure you that I've had a good life. I graduated from Boston University and work in social media marketing for a sustainability startup in Boston. I'm healthy and happy, though admittedly still processing this recent discovery about my identity. I don't wish to disrupt your life or family, and I will completely understand if you prefer not to respond. But if you are open to it, I would welcome the opportunity to learn more about you, Patricia, and my biological heritage. Even just medical information would be helpful. Whatever you decide, please know that I hold no ill feelings about your decision. From what little I know, you made the choice you felt was best at the time, and I respect that. Sincerely, Waverly Thompson. I included my phone number and address, then sat staring at the send button for a full 10 minutes before finally clicking it. The email disappeared into cyberspace, possibly to change multiple lives forever, or possibly to be deleted unread by a stranger who shared my DNA. 3 days passed with no response. I cycled through hope, disappointment, understanding, and back to hope again. On the 4th day, I received a text message from an unknown California number, Waverly. This is Patricia Chen. Michael showed me your email. We would very much like to speak with you. Are you available for a video call this evening at 8 p.m. your time? We have so much to tell you. My hands trembled as I responded with a simple, yes, thank you. I'll be here. The hours until 8 p.m. crawled by. I cleaned my apartment, obsessively changed outfits 3 times, and finally settled on a simple blue blouse that brought out the warm tones in my skin, the skin I now knew I had inherited from them. At exactly 8 p.m., my laptop chimed with an incoming video call. I took a deep breath and clicked accept. 2 faces appeared on my screen, the same faces from the profiles I had found, but now animated with nervous smiles and eyes that studied me hungrily. The woman, Patricia, my biological mother, had her hand pressed to her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. Michael had his arm around her shoulders, his expression a complex mixture of wonder and apprehension. Waverly, Patricia whispered. Look at you. You're so beautiful. You look just like my mother, Michael added softly. My mother always said we would have beautiful children. For a moment, none of us knew what to say next. We just stared at each other across 3,000 miles and 29 years of separation, drinking in the similarities in our features, the shared genetics that no secret could erase. Thank you for reaching out, Patricia finally said. I've dreamed about this day, but I never thought we agreed to a closed adoption. We thought it was better for you that way. Why, I asked the question that had been burning inside me since I'd discovered the truth. Why did you give me up? The Thompsons said you were too young, too unstable. Patricia and Michael exchanged a look, and I could see decades of shared pain pass between them. That's not entirely accurate, Michael said carefully. We were young, yes, both 22 when you were born. But the decision wasn't as simple as the Thompsons may have led you to believe. We need to tell you the whole story, Patricia added. You deserve the truth, all of it. But first, do you have questions for us? There must be so many things you want to know. I did have questions, thousands of them. About their lives, about my heritage, about medical history and family traits. But one question burned brighter than all the others. The letter, I said. Patricia, you wrote a letter asking the Thompsons to tell me someday that giving me up was the hardest thing you ever did, that you loved me. Did you mean that fresh tears spilled down Patricia's cheeks? Every word. Leaving you was like leaving a piece of my soul behind. Not a day has passed in 29 years that I haven't thought of you, wondered about you, loved you from afar. We never had another daughter, Michael added quietly. We have two wonderful children who would be thrilled to meet their big sister someday. But there has always been a Waverly-shaped hole in our family. The dam broke then, and I found myself sobbing not from anger or grief this time, but from a profound sense of being wanted, of being loved, of finally understanding where I came from and knowing that I hadn't been a mistake after. All, through tears, I began asking all the questions I had stored up over the years without even knowing I needed answers, about family medical history, about cultural traditions, about whether anyone else in the family was as pathologically organized as I was. Your grandmother, Chen Michael, confirmed with a laugh about whether my love of photography came from somewhere. Your grandfather Rodriguez was a photographer, Patricia told me. As the conversation flowed more easily, they gradually revealed the true story of my adoption, one far more complicated than the sanitized version the Thompsons had shared with Madeline. Patricia and Michael had indeed been students at Yale with Richard and Eleanor, but they hadn't been friends exactly. Patricia had been Eleanor's roommate freshman year before Eleanor moved off campus to live with Richard. Michael and Richard had been in the same biology study group briefly. I got pregnant during our senior year, Patricia explained. We were in love, committed to each other, but our families were another story. My traditional Catholic parents in Puerto Rico were horrified that I was pregnant and unmarried. Michael's parents in California were equally upset and concerned about him throwing away his future with a family before his career was established. We wanted to keep you, Michael emphasized. We had it all planned out. I had a job offer in California. Patricia was going to finish her master's program there. We were going to make it work. So what happened, I asked. Patricia's expression darkened. Eleanor happened. She and Richard had been married for a couple of years by then. They'd been trying to have a second child after Madeline with no success. When Eleanor found out I was pregnant and struggling with family pressure, she saw an opportunity, Michael finished grimly. She told Patricia they would adopt you, give you the stable home our families thought we couldn't provide, and everyone would win. At first I refused, Patricia continued, but Eleanor was persuasive. She brought Richard into it, and he used his family connections to offer Michael an even better job opportunity, one contingent on us agreeing to the adoption. It was coercion, I realized, feeling sick. Not legally, Michael said carefully. We did sign the papers voluntarily, but we were young, scared, facing intense pressure from all sides. Eleanor painted a picture of how perfect your life would be with them, all the advantages they could give you that we couldn't. And we believed her when she promised they would tell you about us someday, Patricia added. That they would give you my letter, let you know you were loved and wanted. Finding out they never did that. Her voice broke. After the adoption, we tried to check on you a few times, Michael said. But the Thompsons changed their phone number. It became clear they wanted no contact. We got married anyway, moved to California like we'd planned, Patricia continued, built our lives, had Gabriella and Daniel, but we never forgot you, Waverly. Never. By the end of our 2-hour conversation, I had a clearer picture of who I was and where I came from. I also had an invitation to visit San Francisco to meet my biological family in person, including my half-siblings who Patricia texted during our call, and who immediately sent enthusiastic messages welcoming me and expressing their shock and excitement. When we finally said goodnight with promises to talk again soon, I sat in my quiet apartment feeling fundamentally changed. The Thompsons had not merely adopted me, they had manipulated and pressured my biological parents, then systematically erased any trace of my true origins, depriving me of my cultural heritage and family connections. The question now was what to do with this knowledge. 6 months later, I stood in the arrivals area of Logan Airport, waiting for familiar faces. So much had changed since that first video call with Patricia and Michael. I had flown to San Francisco twice to spend time with my biological family, forming genuine connections with them, especially with my half-siblings, Gabriella and Daniel, who had welcomed me with open arms and endless curiosity about my life. I had also confronted the Thompsons with what I'd learned about the circumstances of my adoption. The conversation had been painful, with initial denials giving way to reluctant admissions, and finally tearful apologies from Eleanor. Richard had seemed genuinely remorseful, claiming he'd wanted to tell me the truth many times over the years, but had deferred to Eleanor's insistence that it would only hurt me. Whether their remorse was genuine or merely a reaction to being caught, I couldn't fully determine. But I had made my position clear. I would maintain a relationship with them, but on new terms, with honesty, respect, and acknowledgement of my complete identity, including my Hispanic and Chinese heritage that they had erased. Madeline had surprised me by becoming my staunchest ally. When the truth about the coercive nature of my adoption came out, she had been appalled and had used her legal background to help me navigate the complex emotions and practical considerations of reconnecting with my biological family. She had even adjusted her family trust plans to ensure that her child and any future children would know me as their aunt and treat my future children as their cousins, regardless of biology. Now, both families were about to meet for the first time. The Chens, Patricia, Michael, Gabriella, and Daniel had flown in from California for Madeline's baby shower. It had been my idea to invite them, a bridge-building gesture that had initially met with resistance from Eleanor, but eventual acceptance after Richard and Madeline had insisted. As they emerged from the security area, Patricia, with her elegant silver-streaked bun, Michael, with his serious eyes that crinkled when he smiled, Gabriella and Daniel chatting animatedly, I felt a profound sense of wholeness that had eluded me my entire life. "There she is," Daniel called out, spotting me first. They rushed over, enveloping me in hugs that felt both new and familiar at the same time. "Ready for this?" Patricia asked quietly, as we collected their luggage, nodding toward the exit where I would drive them to my apartment before tomorrow's shower. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied with a smile. It's time for all the pieces of my life to finally come together. The journey to discover my true identity had been painful, filled with betrayal and long-buried secrets. But it had also led to unexpected connections, new family bonds, and a stronger sense of self than I had ever thought possible. What had begun with an accidentally sent voice memo had culminated in the integration of my fragmented past into a more complete and authentic future. One where I was no longer living someone else's carefully constructed narrative, but writing my own story at last. Wow, what a journey this has been. I can't believe how much my life has changed since that fateful voice memo. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed your perspective on everything? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. This experience taught me that family isn't just about blood, it's about honesty, acceptance, and love. If this story of family betrayal and eventual healing resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories about family dynamics and personal growth. Don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to discover your true identity and find healing. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and I'll see you in the next video.